Intro music fades in slowly, eerie tones layered with distant echoes. Narrator, low, chilling tone. Take a look at this place. At first glance, it is nothing more than a rugged cave carved into the Scottish coastline. From the outside, the view is breathtaking. Waves crash against jagged rocks, the ocean stretches endlessly, and the surrounding countryside glows with natural beauty. But beauty, as history reminds us, can often be deceptive. For hidden within these cliffs lies one of the most disturbing legends ever whispered through Scotland's dark folklore, an unspeakable tale of murder, terror, and cannibalism. This is the story of Sawney Bean and his family, the so-called clan of cannibals who supposedly haunted these shores centuries ago. As always, viewer discretion is advised. Dramatic pause. Intro fades. The year was 1977. Across America, audiences packed theaters and drive-in cinemas, eager for the latest offering from director Wes Craven. His first film, The Last House on the Left, had already cemented his reputation as a daring horror storyteller, but his next creation would push boundaries even further. The film was The Hills Have Eyes. What began as a seemingly ordinary road trip for the fictional Carter family spirals into unrelenting terror as they are hunted by a savage, cave-dwelling clan lurking in the Nevada desert. The movie horrified critics and delighted horror fans, grossing over $25 million at the box office and later spawning sequels and a 2006 remake. But what most people don't know is that Craven's gruesome vision wasn't born entirely from imagination. During his research, he stumbled across an ancient Scottish tale, so vile, so grotesque, that he used it as the foundation for his monstrous family. That story was the legend of Sawney Bean. The details of his birth are uncertain, but records suggest Alexander Sawney Bean was born in Scotland sometime during the late 15th century. His father was a hedge trimmer. His mother worked as a ditch digger, both ordinary people who earned their meager living through relentless labor. But Sawney was not like his parents. From a young age, he displayed no taste for honest work. He shirked responsibility, despised labor, and was quickly branded as idle and worthless. Where others sweated for survival, Sawney preferred to wander, dream, and scheme. Eventually, he met a woman known as Agnes Douglas. Though many whispered she was a practitioner of dark arts, even accused of witchcraft, for Sawney, she was the perfect partner. Together they abandoned the world of toil and scorn, fleeing northward to the wild coastal county of Ayrshire. There, with no plan other than survival, they stumbled upon their sanctuary, a hidden cave at Balcruchan Bay. Its entrance, little more than a slit in the rocks, was easily overlooked by travelers, but inside it stretched nearly 600 feet into the earth, branching into a labyrinth of cold stone corridors, nearly a mile of winding passages. At high tide, waves flooded the opening, making the cavern nearly invisible to outsiders. It was here that Sawney and Agnes chose to build their life, far removed from civilization, shrouded in secrecy. But a cave provided no food. Sawney had no intention of farming or fishing when quicker methods existed. The roads that connected the villages of Ayrshire were narrow, often isolated and regularly traveled by merchants and wanderers. Sawney began lurking along these paths, ambushing lone riders or small groups. At first, it was simple robbery. Jewelry, coins, livestock, food, anything of value was stripped from the victims. Sawney would disappear back into the cliffs, returning to Agnes with his loot. But the problem with robbery was always the same: witnesses. Scotland's justice was harsh. Thieves often faced the noose, and every witness meant a risk. Sawney found an easy solution. Dead men told no tales. He began killing those he robbed. But this birthed a new problem: corpses. If bodies were discovered scattered across the countryside, authorities would surely launch manhunts. Again, Sawney devised a brutal answer. Instead of discarding the evidence, why not use it? Victims were dragged into the cave, butchered, and prepared. What could not be eaten immediately was salted or pickled for later. Thus began the reign of Scotland's most infamous cannibal clan. For years, Sawney and Agnes thrived on this monstrous arrangement. Malnourishment gave way to strength as they gorged on the flesh of their victims. Soon, children followed, 14 in all, 8 sons and 6 daughters. From the very moment they could chew, they were fed on human flesh. As the children grew older, they joined their father in ambushes. What once had been the work of a single man became a family enterprise. They struck larger groups, overwhelming travelers with terrifying efficiency. No one was spared. Horses, wagons, valuables, and flesh, all were carried back to the cave. And then came the next generation. With no contact with the outside world, the children turned to one another as partners, producing more children, 22 sons, 18 daughters, until the clan numbered 46 in total. Inside the cave, clothing and belongings of hundreds of victims piled into grotesque heaps. The stench of death hung heavy. Pickled meat filled barrels, while salted limbs lined the stone walls like butchers' trophies. Whatever was left uneaten, they tossed into the ocean. Body parts washing ashore convinced villagers that wild animals, perhaps sea creatures, were to blame for missing travelers. For 25 years, Sawney Bean's hidden empire of terror thrived in silence, but the outside world was not blind. Disappearances mounted, merchants vanished, entire families never reached their destinations. Fear gripped the countryside. Innkeepers were accused of murder. After all, inns were often the last place missing travelers were seen. Many were wrongfully executed, though none ever confessed. Suspicion grew wild. Mass searches combed the forests and coastlines, but the cave remained hidden. Even when a search party stumbled upon its entrance, they dismissed it as impossible. No one could live inside a sea cave that flooded with every tide. And so, the Beans remained unseen, their nocturnal hunts continuing without interruption. Every predator eventually makes a mistake. For Sawney Bean and his brood, it came one night around the year 1600. A man and his wife were returning from a village fair along the familiar narrow roads. The Beans struck. Women of the clan tore the wife from her horse, clawing and ripping at her until she was nearly torn apart. But her husband was no ordinary victim. He was armed, trained in combat, and driven by horror. With sword and pistol, he fought savagely against the swarm, and fate intervened. Another group of 20 to 30 fairgoers came upon the ambush. Outnumbered for the first time, the Beans fled into the woods, leaving behind carnage, but, critically, leaving behind a living witness. The survivor rode with the other travelers to Glasgow and told his tale. The magistrate listened carefully, connecting the dots, decades of disappearances, body parts washing ashore, and now this account of feral cave-dwelling attackers. For the first time, the truth seemed within reach. The case was brought directly before King James VI of Scotland. The king, already obsessed with witchcraft and strange disappearances, was horrified by the account. Without hesitation, he raised an army of 400 men accompanied by hounds and personally led the hunt for the Bean clan. The king's army swept through Ayrshire, searching forests and coastlines. Again, they nearly bypassed the cave until the hounds caught the scent. The dogs pulled wildly at their chains, howling at the narrow slit in the rocks. Soldiers forced their way inside, torches in hand. Step by step, the smell grew stronger, an overpowering stench of decay. Then, deep within the labyrinth, they saw it. The cavern opened into a grisly chamber. Human limbs hung from the walls. Barrels brimmed with pickled flesh. Piles of bones and rotting corpses lay scattered. Clothing and jewelry stolen from countless victims littered the floor. It was not merely a hideout. It was a slaughterhouse. And, at the center of it all was the Bean family. Dozens of wide-eyed figures, filthy and feral, stared back at the intruders. When the shock broke, they fought, but outnumbered and cornered, they were subdued and dragged from their lair. The king wasted no time. Bypassing the courts, he decreed immediate execution. The men were mutilated, genitals severed, hands and feet cut off, left to bleed before the women and children. When the last of the men had died, the women were burned alive at the stake, the fate reserved for witches. And with fire and blood, the legend of the Bean clan came to its horrific end. But did it really happen? For centuries, the tale of Sawney Bean has been repeated as history, yet concrete evidence is elusive. Historians note that no official records, newspapers, or diaries from the era mention such mass disappearances or the execution of an entire family of 46. Surely, they argue, an event so shocking would have been documented. The story's earliest known appearance comes from the Newgate Calendar, an 18th century publication notorious for sensationalizing crimes. Many suspect the entire tale was a work of Gothic exaggeration, and yet, fragments of truth may linger. In the 14th century, a Scottish outlaw named Christy Cleek was said to have resorted to cannibalism during a famine, leading a band of raiders that preyed on travelers. Smuggling and banditry along the Ayrshire coast were also well documented, with caves often used as hideouts. It's possible the Sawney Bean legend is a twisted amalgamation of these histories, distorted by centuries of retelling. So what do we make of the legend? Was there truly a cannibal family lurking in a sea cave for 25 years, or is it nothing more than folklore inflated into horror? Regardless of the truth, the story endures, so gruesome, so chilling, that it inspired one of horror cinema's most infamous films and remains one of Scotland's darkest legends. The cave still exists today, its entrance battered by waves, hiding in plain sight. Travelers still come to stare at its dark maw, wondering what might have once lurked inside. Perhaps it's only a story. Or perhaps long ago, beneath the crash of the waves, the screams of the lost did echo from within those walls. Distant echo of waves, outro music rising slowly, narrator, low final. This was the horrifying tale of the Cave of Cannibals. Screen fades to black.